Well, welcome to Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real parents about what's going on in our Texas schools. And today I'm joined by Ryan Hecker, the Managing Director of Charter Schools Now PAC, which is the political arm of the Texas Public Charter School Association. As important as working for all the parents and the charter schools of Texas and the 400,000 kids in our public charter schools, he's also a father of four. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Mandy. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for being here, and we're excited to dive into how parents all across Texas are truly being empowered with choices and the opportunity to select charter schools here in our great state.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about the growth of charter schools here in Texas and how many different options are being offered to parents?
Oh, yes. Charter schools offer, it's about 7% of all students in the state of Texas. They represent about 7%. There's no desire for charters to take over the public school system, to take over traditional ISDs, but there are options. There are options throughout the state for parents. So some of those options include classical academies. They include STEM academies. But then, in some cases, they're just smaller options that are where the leadership is more representative of the people, of the kids that go to that school. There are options. And so that's what I think we charter schools offer. They give parents the choice outside of the school that they're sending their kid to, or that they're being forced to send their kid to be able to choose other options about things that might, interest them. And I think, it's not one size fits all. There are some great schools. There are some great ISDs. It doesn't have to be like a charter school needs to be in an F-rated, next to an F-rated ISD. There are some great schools across the state. ISDs are in many cases wonderful. That doesn't mean it's right for every kid.
That's right.
And I've learned that in my own family, where the best school in the city is not necessarily the best school for my child. And I'm sure a lot of other families have the same experience.
That's right. I love that you talk about your children because I know that you actually have children that are in magnet schools.
Yes.
And traditional public schools. And I myself am a charter parent. A lot of people don't realize that, but I have the opportunity to send my kids to an incredible classical charter school. That was our choice, my husband and I. And so it really is a gift to be able to have choices for parents, both within the public sector, the public school sector, but also for anyone that maybe decides that they need something else, whether that's homeschooling or private school or whatnot. So recently, we just watched as the State Board of Education voted to allow 4 new charters here in Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of how charter schools go through the charter authorization and application process to actually be qualified to offer a great education and also be an additional choice for parents?
Yes. This is for new charters. So, often, a teacher might have an idea or a school administrator at a traditional ISD campus may have an idea, or a nonprofit may have a thought about, what can we offer to the community? And in some cases, it's, it's innovative. In some cases, for instance, Thrive Academy, it was, focusing on kids with autism because there was a real personal connection. There was one this year in Big Spring, which is socially, an economically disadvantaged community in West Texas. It was to provide another option to the kids there, and to a real community-based option. And so, there are many reasons for folks to want to start a charter. And what they do is they have to put forward a very strong application to TEA, to Texas Education Agency, that provides, dozens and dozens of pages long, and it provides everything from financial and fiscal, viability to the vision, to what types of the idea. I mean, it really has to be a fully formed kind of business plan that they present to TEA. Texas Education Agency then has outside reviewers that score all these applications. And then the best ones that score highly from Texas Education Agency then go to capacity interviews. And then the staff, the knowledgeable, experienced, expert staff at the Texas Education Agency interviews all the finalist applicants that they've considered that put forth the strongest applications and puts them through the ringer on everything that they want to offer, on trying to find weaknesses in their application, on having them answer some really difficult questions. And then from that, in the last few years, they choose five out of dozens.
That's it.
5 out of dozens that get through
Okay.
Texas Education Agency.
So dozens of people of charter school applicants apply at the TEA and say, I've got a great idea. I see a need. There's a demand in this community. You pointed out Thrive specifically specializes in creating and really curating a school for those with autism, which is incredible. So they go through this really rigorous process at the TEA, and then they move over if they're one of the lucky few. So we're talking 5 out of oftentimes dozens. If not, I mean, at one point, I believe there was 100 applicants from what I remember hearing a year ago, where that people were really. So it really is a select few that have demonstrated that they not only have an incredible vision and that there's a demand in a community, but also that they're able to actually execute on starting a school.
Yes. And then they go to a political body called the State Board of Education. And the State Board of Education, there are 15 State Board of Education members around the state. If you ask the average, savvy political nerd in Texas who their State Board of Ed member is, it often stumps them because these seats are gigantic.
Yep.
They are twice the size of state Senate seats. 4 times the size of Texas congressional seats, but people don't know who they are. They're very far down ballot during the elections. So these folks have the ability to veto the Texas Education Agency's recommendations.
Okay.
So they go through. There's this winnowing process of based on the expertise of dozens of people in the Texas Education Agency. And then a body of 15 can choose to veto any of these applicants. And so we work closely with the applicants. We put them through mock interviews, like really, really hard. That's one of my greatest joys, is putting them through really difficult mock interviews where we really try to attack their application. But from what I do is from a political lens too. So it really shifts from, have you created a great application? Okay. And that still matters to the Texas State Board of Education, to some of the more kind of, really focused on that sort of thing members, but it becomes very much a political decision. And so it's not, it changes from, have I put forth a good application, to, can I keep 8 members of the state board from vetoing me for whatever reason they may have for vetoing me.
Okay.
And so it becomes a political process that we, try to help them navigate through. And there's a whole movement, grassroots movement, trying to help them navigate through.
Yeah. So you brought up the politics of it, right? What are some of the challenges or the concerns or the secrets that that you'd be willing to share about kind of that political side? I mean, for an elected official, such as the State Board of Education member, they always have people that they're beholden to, or parties that represent them, or things like that. So what are some of the politics behind, once you go through that exhaustive process at the TEA, getting actually through the process with this elected board that has a lot of political dynamics and political ideologies that are influencing the decision making?
How much time do you have? I could talk for the next 45 minutes.
Tell us some secrets.
So, when entering the 2022 election cycle, basically, new charter applicants are determined. They're voted on by the State Board of Education in June.
Okay.
And so entering 2022, so in the 2021 cycle, in the June 2022 cycle, there were only 1 out of 5 applicants was approved. Only 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 applicants were approved. And so we're dealing with a board that was anti-charter.
Okay.
We could count on basically 2 fingers the number of actual strong supporters. And at that point, pretty much 1 strong supporter and 1 sort of supporter.
When you say, sorry to interrupt, but when you say anti-charter, these are charter applicants that have gone through this process, as you mentioned, with experts that are in the education field, policy experts. So if they're submitting an application to serve children that maybe are not being well served in their assigned school based on the street they live on, how could anyone look at it and say, we're against the whole broad umbrella of charters? Why would someone do that?
Well, let me say something first. So to get through the process, as I said, requires external reviewers. Yeah. Initially with TEA, I think TPPF did an analysis of those external reviewers and found a few of them to be broadly anti-charter, meaning giving low scores to every applicant.
Yep.
And so, how does that change the dynamics of who even gets through to TEA is an open question. But what that means is they do not believe there's a handful of State Board of Education members now, but back in 2022, a lot more, who believed on both sides of the aisle. This is a Republican majority board. This isn't a Democratic board. It's a Republican majority board that believed that charters overall should not be approved because charters, and it depends on where they sit. Democrats were typically, tied to the teachers unions. And so the anti-charter Democrats believe that, because charter schools are more flexible, they are, and because they, teachers are not unionized in charter schools, that they are a threat to the power of the unions. And so these politicians and Democratic politicians align with the teachers unions and are against charters. On the Republican side, which, I think, folks in the school choice world have learned a lot about.
The parent empowerment movement, Ryan.
The parent empowerment movement have learned a lot about in recent years, but has always existed.
Yep.
But especially in the State Board of Education, where education, a lot of these folks are former ISD board members. Yep. In rural areas, is that rural Republicans are real, in some cases, real enemies to charters, and that is partially due to the power of the superintendents and the school boards of these rural communities, who may not have a charter within 200 miles of them,
right?
But there's a threat of there's a feeling of a threat to their funding because state money follows the child. So it's not about what's best for families. It's about what's best for the school and what's best for the infrastructure and the power that the superintendent has. And then there are groups, outside groups like TASB, like Raise Your Hand Texas, that are pushing on these rural Republicans to try to have them be one mouthpiece for an anti-parent empowerment perspective. And so, that's what we're up against. Yep. And on the state board, it was even more extreme in 2020, going into the 2022 election cycle, because they were, a lot of them in the past never faced an election before, really. They were kind of handed the election, they handed the seat from their predecessor. Because
they were handpicked, right?
Because they were handpicked by their predecessor, and no one had the funding or figured out the pathway to victory to pick to challenge a State Board of Ed member, because these seats are gigantic. No one knows who these, very few people know who these folks are. And it's very hard to run a race, an electoral race, to unseat somebody that no one really knows about to begin with. And the amount of money it would cost to truly impact those races, to actually control those races, is too much. That has ever been, is probably 10 times more than has ever been spent on a State Board of Ed race. So, the board was entering the 22 cycle very leaning very anti-charter. And then meanwhile, on top of the teachers' unions and superintendents, there's this other crowd, and I don't even know how to define them. Maybe you can do a better job at defining them, Mandy, but they're the kind of weird, tied to TEA, fake Republican, Lynn Davenport, Mary Lowe crowd that have somehow, influenced the maybe the homeschool folks or something that take an overall perspective that any private-public partnerships are bad. That there's a threat to I don't even know what by having charters exist. Sure. It seems to me that they're just kind of shills for the teachers unions. But that exists. Those folks have influence, and so that's something else that we face.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different challenges. I really, think about this all the time in the parent empowerment movement. Yeah, I mentioned I am a public charter school mom, classical school. In my opinion, that's where it's at. I don't want technology. I want my kids learning reading, writing, math, history, and all that good stuff. And I think, you hit the nail on the head. You've got so many different entities really beholden to a system and that see our children as little widgets with dollars attached to them, and they should be a part of that system, right? Unless you are have the resources to write a check to a private school, or you're one of the lucky ones, like I consider myself, that wins the lottery. I can remember when we got the notification that my daughter, before kindergarten, that she got into this incredible charter school, and I yelled at my husband. I said, we won the lottery, because we really are one of those families that had the opportunity. And then we had to pick up and move to be able to go there. And that was another blessing that so many families don't have. And you're right. There is a movement of so many people that really believe that a system, that a bureaucracy should be controlling and dictating not only where our children are going to school simply based on the money in our bank account, or if you're lucky enough to get into a great charter school. I know there's 76,000 kids that are on charter school wait lists.
Yes.
And so I don't know, but I do know that we're approaching $100 billion a year on public education in Texas. And I know that approximately 60 cents on the dollar does not go into the classrooms. And so when we talk about any of these entities that are constantly advocating against parents, oftentimes parents themselves, oftentimes parents that either did not send their child to a school, they say, or they publicly say, I would not send my child to a public school right now where I'm zoned for, are the ones that fight against parents. So I don't know, other than to say that the American Federation for Teachers, which is run by Randy Weingarten out of New York, very left-leaning, very, union, collective. You're not an individual. You are a part of a system. March on, comrade, is kind of where they're getting their orders from. And they do a very good job, a lot of people, at saying, it's for the kids, don't you know? And as we know in the parent empowerment movement, including the charters, this is about recognizing that my children are mine and I know what's best for them. And that has nothing to do with the street that we live on. It has nothing to do with the money in the bank account. And the same thing for you. You send your kids to magnet schools, and I hear this all the time. We have choice. There's magnet schools, which is amazing. That is for so many children that are oftentimes advanced, excel in one particular field, and they're wonderful. But the truth is that only 3% of kids in our public school system go to a magnet school. And 75% of those kids that apply to go to a magnet school don't get in. So I don't know why a lot of parents, particularly parents, I know why childless parts of the system, the AFT guided system, they are protecting their power and money, right? I mean, $100 billion, that is a lot of money. But my kids are mine and your kids are yours. And Texas parents know that they love their children most and should be in control regardless of that zip code. But I'm glad that you really were willing to kind of pull the covers back and point out what drives a lot of these political systems that are making choices for kids that are making choices. And
Yeah.
that's what it is it's strong-arming parents.
And there's a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Like in the last, so as you said, this time around in the State Board of Ed, the last two because we had a very successful 2022 cycle.
So talk about that real quick.
And this is something I could talk about forever again. How to win a State Board of Ed race, and we're still learning. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I think we have some basics down on what it takes to win a State Board of Ed race with limited resources. How to challenge effectively an incumbent, how to win an open seat, what matters. And so entering the 2022 cycle, as I said, we only had one real supporter, maybe two, and a bunch of swings and a bunch of opponents. And in one cycle, we flipped 6 seats. We flipped 5 seats. So we were at
that's incredible.
Definite 6 supporters now. Now going into January 2025, we'll have 7. And with a few swings, it get us to 8. And I think what we discovered this cycle, the last two, that it matters. Elections matter.
They matter.
And I could talk a lot more about what it takes, but elections matter. And ultimately, they mattered a ton in 2022, not just in terms of the makeup of the board and the numbers of charter supporters, but we got 4 out of 5 after only getting 1 out of 5. We got 4 out of 5 the last 2 years. And it's because of a few things. It's not just because of the numbers, but it's who we elected. Stacey Childs in Houston as a Democrat is a true champion.
She's a warrior for kids.
A warrior, a fighter for everything. And she'll say whatever, she'll stand up against, she's a Democrat. She'll stand up against the governor on the takeover of the HISD school system. She'll do things that are, she'll fight for the curriculum that Democrats stand for. But on the other hand, she is vehemently believes in options for kids. And she was a fighter. And in the last 2 cycles, State Board of Ed cycles, she's one of the primary reasons 4 out of 5 were approved. She was able to move Democrats to vote for the charters that she cared about. And that ability, that charisma, was irreplaceable.
Yeah.
The other big victory, besides Julie Pickett and L.J. Francis, who are both great leaders, is Aaron Kinsey's ascension to the chairmanship of the State Board of Ed has made a huge impact.
Yeah.
He was recruited by a lot of folks to run against an incumbent that was the rural incumbent, a very nice veterinarian or dentist. Seems like dentists and veterinarians run for these positions, but and a dentist, and he, but it was not pro charter,
Right.
And Aaron Kinsey unseated him, and then rose very quickly to be chairman, appointed by the governor, and led this past approval process, and really was a strong proponent for charters.
Yeah.
So that's how we ended up with 4 out of 5. But the other thing that happened is other folks that weren't traditionally with us have moved towards us. So someone like Audrey Young, after being on the board for several years, she's a very smart person. She's learned. She sees a lot, and she really did her research. And you've seen a real progression on how many schools she supported. It was 2 schools her first year, 3 schools last year, 4 out of 5 this year. And it's because of her. It's because once they're on the board, and there are other Republicans defending charters and even Democrats, it creates an opportunity for a real open discussion.
Yeah.
That where TASB isn't the most powerful voice in the room.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of how you have fearless leaders like Chairman Kinsey, who came in and really just demonstrated a mastery of understanding the education system, but also a mastery of defending parents, right? Because this is what's driving the parent empowerment movement for education savings accounts, and it's what's driving the parent empowerment movement for just freedom in general, because that's what this is about. And seeing several of the candidates that you mentioned that then won on that messaging of I'm here for kids, I'm here to improve the system as a whole, I'm here to empower parents, and you said it, it really did take away. I don't know if you all caught people flat-footed, but it sure seems that way. Entities, like you said, TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, and their little sister, TASA, the Texas Association of School Administrators. And there's 50 of the alphabet soup crew now that, uses taxpayer dollars to effectively advocate against parents and, quite frankly, improvement for our entire system. So seeing that, what would ultimately be the weakening of the power. I mean, we're constantly hearing from all angles. People say we've had enough of these groups that are all about the control, that are all about controlling at the public school level, but really dictating what parents have options to go to. Do you think that the weakening of these systemic, well, quite frankly, parasites, right, that just feed off the taxpayers while advocating only for protection and power of a system, do you think that the 2022 elections and most recently the elections that we just witnessed really, for lack of better terms, kneecapped these parasites, these profiteers that steer taxpayer dollars to advocate against taxpayers? Do you think that's contributed to the shift and the willingness to embrace empowering parents and expanding charters?
I think elections matter. Yeah. I think I think it's less. I mean, I think it is. Has been a shift. I still think they're very powerful. Mm-hmm. I still think that they have a lot of influence. I still think that they are Goliath, and the charter school movement and the parent empowerment movement is still David, being presented as Goliath by them. I mean, they have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars around the country to spend, and our PAC budget was about $2 million, which is great. Yes. And it's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to even the Raise Your Hand PAC, which had 4 times as much money. Right. So, and that's only one piece of a much larger pot for all the teachers unions and everything else. So, we're up against this big enemy. I do think, elections, Republicans, especially, there was a reckoning in this past cycle, but in the State Board of Education in 2022, that being, that recognizing that parents have options and should have options is fundamental to believing in freedom and in educational freedom, especially around charters and having public options should be a something that is central to being a Republican. But also a Democrat, honestly.
But really apparent.
So,
I mean,
really
that's what I was going to say. It's really apparent, right? Because in theory, you said, that they are financially, they are absolutely Goliath, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to elections mattering, parents showing up across the spectrum, because this empowering parents really is an issue that transcends political ideology. Yep. It transcends income. It transcends race. No one loves our own child, our own children, like a parent does. And I really think that that's why we've seen parents stand up, get active, and go vote. And it really has shifted the power structure at this point. And I think the more parents recognize their involvement in really understanding both who's being elected at the state level or the SBOE level, as well as at the state level for the legislature, is really, really important. I remember, I believe it's a story of Representative Cole Hefner, who had some parents show up, over a year ago. And if I remember this correctly, he kind of had one of these, TASB or one of these entities come in and said, "Who are you going to stand with, us or them?" And his response was, "I'm going to stand with parents." It was just real simple. If you're parents that are, parents that want what's best for their kids, which ultimately improves the whole system. Let's talk a little bit about the charter school offerings across Texas. I, again, sing the praises of my kids' school. It's a classical school. I'm a big fan of that model. I really want to make sure that my children have a strong foundation, starting with phonics in reading. We've talked about this before. 2019, we had to pass a law to mandate the teaching of phonics, even though there's decades of research that says it's far superior. But there are other really incredible charters that are being started by innovative leaders, innovative educators, such as Thrive, which you mentioned serves autistic kids, which is incredible. What other types of charters are thriving and really trying to grow here in Texas so that Texas parents can know the other options that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, every kind of option under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Something, I kind of like the idea innovative isn't, it's great if something's innovative, but often is it just an option that succeeds
Mm-hmm.
at educating kids effectively. And I think that's across Texas many options for parents, whether it's as you said, a classical academy, whether there's one that is very STEM and academically focused, like Basis, or
when you say
Harmony.
STEM, tell families what you're talking about. Some families may not know.
Math and engineering focused. There are vocational. There are charters very focused on one that was just approved for Manor in the Manor ISD system, or in Manor, that is focused on vocational education. There are schools that are just smaller schools that are, for example, there's one in Houston that's being run by, and it was by his parents and then himself. He's a NASA engineer, an African American NASA engineer.
Wow.
That left to run this charter school, and the school the Beatrice Mays Academy does really well because there's this
He's
black
from
leader.
NASA?
Yes.
And he's serving disadvantaged or low income, mostly minority kids.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And it's that kind of if you talk to all it's so interesting watching the State Board of Education operate, because you have these the folks putting forward, these like administrators and others who are putting forward their vision for a charter.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have, like, as you said, the educrats saying, oh, they're all about, look at it, it's just this, they're trying to steal money and blah. Yeah. But if you listen to their stories, it's like they're
Right.
passionate about kids and they're passionate about their ideas. This isn't an easy thing. This isn't some like money-making scheme. Right. Charters are, very much underfunded.
I was going to say, let's be clear. Charter schools receive significantly less money, right, than the traditional public school. When charter schools were passed, that was very intentional, right? You had those lobbyists, you had TASB and all the lobbying entities in there in the ears of legislators and said, we can't give them the same. And yet we see that so many of them are far outpacing what their local ISD is doing. So it's not that there's different kids, it's that they're providing a different environment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And these applicants are putting forward these visions that they care about. And again, they're all nonprofits. They're all public.
Right.
These folks are not like, they are just passionate about kids.
Right.
And to watch some of the anti-charter State Board of Ed members, right, who are just against charters.
They're against kids.
Kids.
Let's be real.
Yes.
That's what they're against. They're against kids having an alternate choice than what's assigned to them by the system, the government, right? That's what it is.
And they're being extremely disingenuous. Like if you were to watch, I don't ask you to do it because it's for many people boring.
It's totally boring.
But they could watch, but it's actually fun to watch the applicants be interviewed by the State Board of Ed members who have control of the veto. And some of them, and I could call them out by name if you want to, would ask these like really passionate educators who want to start these charters. They would say things like, next year you should just come back with a stronger application and then we'll support you. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are folks that vote against every charter school every single year. Mm-hmm. And they're lying to these educators because they don't want charters.
Right. They don't want charters. So they're telling a great special education educator that sees a need for kids with autism and says, and for an example, it's just, if you just make this change, or if you just did this, just come back next year. Let's ignore the kids that could be served by you now. Let's ignore those children that aren't getting proper services or aren't in the right environment or whose parents are dissatisfied. That's what they're saying, right? Is those kids don't matter. We have to keep this system going.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place, but there's a really great example of this on the State Board of Education. Last cycle in 2020, and by cycle, I don't mean election cycle, in 2023's voting on new charter schools, they do 2 votes. They do an initial vote on Wednesday, and then a final vote that is the true, like, this counts. So it's sort of like a straw poll, and then an actual vote on Friday. There was a member in El Paso who got elected, who replaced the most anti-charter member on the State Board of Education at the time, who voted against the autism school, who was
How do you do that?
Yeah, because she just
That's just gross.
And she handpicked this person to replace her.
Okay.
And so this person this new member is going to. She was in a contested race, and she got elected, and she comes to vote on new charters. And one of our pro-charter Democrats talked to her, and she saw the need. She understood without knowing the issues like that. Without, like, even though she was elected on being anti-charter, she saw. She was like, oh, these kids in El Paso, she was said explicitly, would benefit.
Yeah.
And so in the initial vote on Wednesday, she voted for 4 out of 5 charter schools, right? After being elected by and being chosen by the most anti-charter member of the El Paso delegation.
She watched the applicants, the charter applicants, and she listened to them and heard their passion and heard how they wanted to serve children.
Yes.
They were going to take less money than public schools. Many of them work for peanuts, like the guy from NASA, who a lot of times they do not take money as payment, right? Because they've had a career and they see a need. Okay. So she saw that, and on Wednesday she voted for 4 out of the 5.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it was all hell breaks loose by the teachers' unions, by the former member, Georgina Perez.
What'd they do? Tell us the truth. What's all hell breaks loose? What does that mean?
Behind the scenes, like badgered her, yelled at her, like tried to control her vote to the point that she threatened her, to the point that I don't know about threats, but to the point, all I know is to the point that she went to one of the pro-charter Democrats in the state board and cried, like openly cried about how, like, she can't continue to support those schools, how she got berated about supporting those schools, and then
by lobbyists, by teachers unions. We're talking AFT, TASB, TASA, all the alphabets, all these entities that suck money from taxpayers to fund themselves. They
spent 48 hours
bombarding her,
destroying her, to the point that she was openly crying to another member, and then she voted against all of them. She voted against every single one when the final vote came. So,
is she still here?
Yes, this is her last term, and she was partially pivotal in one of our other schools getting through this time. So, so it's good that happened, but it shows.
But that's what's happened.
Yes.
When you and I talked about this, we want to shine a light on what happens, and this doesn't just happen at the SBOE level, and your PAC is involved at the legislature as well.
Yep.
This is truly what happens, right, with candidates, with elected officials. You want to do the right thing. You want to stand with your parents, but then these systems with tens of millions of dollars in lobbyists and in PAC dollars, right? They say, if you do this, then insert a whole list of bad things for you.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we would never. And I know I'm saying that, but like we would never do that. Now, do we hope to support pro-charter people? Yes, but especially for the state board, like we tell our biggest champions, like our biggest champion on the state board. We have a bunch now.
Yeah.
But our longest champion that currently sits on the state board is Tom Maynard. Tom Maynard doesn't support every applicant every year. This year he didn't support an applicant. He only supported 4 out of 5. He didn't support the 5th. We have others that only supported like 4, sometimes 3 out of 5. We hope more, but we say you have a choice, right? We're supporting you because we understand where your heart is. We understand what you believe. We understand that you'll look at every application honestly with the perspective of wanting to provide choice. If you have, you're an elected official. If you have decisions that go against it, that's fine. Like I could never do what the other side, what the teachers unions and others did to this elected official over 48 hours to break her down so much that she went from 4 out of 5 to support to none, including a school for dyslexia, a school focused on kids with dyslexia. Almost every other member supported that school except her. Because she was so defeated by a system that was, that is built on hard tactics to destroy,
And let's also be clear, it's hard tactics with taxpayer dollars. Yes. Because they collect money, right, from your ISDs. They collect all this money, and sometimes they list themselves as consultants. You can pull it all up, right? Transparency USA tells you where all this is, right, of how money is being used, and you can piece all this together, and you can see the lobbyists that work for the system, those entities that we've talked about, and they're the ones that call and text and are doing really a lot of this terrible engagement when they're making people scared and are engaging in activities that would really just be seen by the general public as pretty abhorrent.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thanks for shooting it and telling it exactly like it is, because that's what empowering parents is all about. It's about saying, look, we clearly have a problem here. We have a problem in the value alignment a lot of times in a lot of our schools, or we have a problem with the educational options, or we have a problem with the quality of education, and empowering parents who can either make the selection to go to a charter school or to select a different school, even open enrollment, right? You have the same system that fights against just saying you can't go to the school. It's always interesting to me. We've talked about open enrollment so many times. Basically, if you don't know what open enrollment is, Texas, it's where if you live on a street and maybe you live on the back of a district line, or maybe you work inside another district, right? And so many districts do not want to allow a parent, if there's an open seat, not saying that you have to build classrooms or schools or anything, but if there's an open seat, and a parent's, it's a good kid, maybe they want to drop them off on their way to work, the districts can say no, or they can say, we're going to charge you. I think it was Lovejoy ISD was charging $9,000 for kids to do open enrollment. That's public school kids going, and their parents were paying $9,000. Down in Representative Steve Allison's district, Alamo Heights, they're one of the highest. They were charging $14,000, and recently I saw posted on X that now they only charged, I think it's $10,000. So people got to understand that giving parents the choices, particularly those 76,000 parents that are on wait lists. Y'all, these parents go through an application. I know because I did it. I actually did what I call a buckshot. Knowing I was zoned for Austin ISD, and like 22% of the families in Austin ISD, I said, nope, not doing that. There's too many problems. Get your house in order. And so I did a buckshot. I applied to several different locations for charters, just knowing I would do anything for my kids to have access to an incredible education. And these parents on the charter wait list, you've got parents that apply year after year after year, and they're still waiting.
Yes, because we have a process in place that makes it really hard for new charters to start up, and and it's difficult to create more options. And then we have a political infrastructure. I think things have become a lot easier since Charter Schools Now PAC has come along, since Starley Coleman joined the Texas Public Charter School Association. But it's still a struggle.
Right.
I also make choices. I've also made a lot of choices for my kids, not just magnets, but also I made some bad choices, or choices I would take back. I'll say, and I feel like this is the height of cognitive dissonance and hypocrisy. Hopefully not from me, but from the system, is, we live in Austin ISD, and we transferred our kids into Westlake, into Eanes ISD. And we thought we won the lottery too. And again, charters are an actual lottery, right? Like charters, it is a pure lottery. Not you can't like there's no like merit based.
Say that real quick, because sometimes legislators, particularly Democrats that are representative of the system, right? They distort how charter schools operate, and they're like, oh, they handpick and whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's not how charter schools operate, right? When we say it's a lottery, mom or dad, guardian, grandparent go in and say, I would like to send my child to this school, and they fill out an application and they go into a lottery. Then what happens?
They go into a lottery, and then it's not based on anything but just pure lottery. They get picked from the lottery. So
a computer system rolls out. You have this many seats.
Yes.
Kind of like I envision that lottery, on when it spins and it spits out those ball numbers. Literally, that's what's happening.
Yes,
They're just spitting out kids' names.
In fact, like there's one school, University of Texas has a charter school where they actually do that. They have like a live stream where they actually draw numbers, and they draw names, and everyone tunes in, and they try to,
So you can't influence it with money, right?
Nope.
You can't influence it you can't, call up a board member or call up whoever started the school. You can't say, hey, I want my kid to go to that school.
Nope. Not at all.
Can you pay money?
No.
Can you offer to pay a little money? Like, here's some money.
Nope.
What happens if you do?
You probably go to jail.
Right, that's right. So just to be clear, it's a lottery system. It takes and it doesn't factor in income. It doesn't factor in the street you live on. It doesn't factor in what your parents do. It doesn't factor in your educational attainment. Right? It factors in none of that.
And I'll say this: so Eanes ISD has a problem, right? Eanes ISD's problem is that they have, because of how wealthy their community is, they don't have as many young families as they need.
Right.
And so they get money, and they have a lot of money leaving their district due to capture, right? So they seek enrollment every year of outside people, even though there are a lot of folks within the district who hate the idea that people could get it, that people could apply and get in and can have choice. The school system still does it because there's real money that comes in, about $5,000 per kid.
Right.
When my kids got in, that was explicitly what the principal said to me, is that you guys are money.
Right.
You're $5,000.
Wait, hold on. The principal literally said to you, you are money.
Yes.
Not welcome. We're so happy to have you. We're glad your children are here. It's going to be
that
great.
should have been the first sign.
That should have been the first sign. We're so happy. You are money.
And my kids are half Indian, right?
Okay.
My wife is Hindu and is Indian, South Asian. And she from Pennsylvania, but and so my kids were the minority at this school. Their process is not a lottery.
Right.
They treat themselves as little magnet programs.
Right.
Where they look at applicants, and guess who they picked?
And that's how magnet schools work as well, right? They look at applicants, they can say, no, not you. Because 75% of kids that apply to magnet schools are told, nope, you must go to the school that you're zoned. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. And so this school, I looked around at the other parents who got in. I mean, they all looked like me. All of them look like me.
Oh, you were their diversity quota.
We were no. All of them look like me for the most part.
Oh, sorry.
But my kids were, kids were like a few. There were like a few Asian. Okay. There were like it was like white kids and Asian kids. That's what it was. And there were no black kids in the room. There were no Hispanic kids in the room. The kids they were bringing in through the system, we were diversity.
They made you apply.
We applied. We went through this process. We had recommendations.
Wait, you had to get recommendations
for a kindergartner.
Sounds like a private school application to me.
Yes, it does.
So you had to apply. Then you had to get recommendations. Say that you're good people, good parents, something like that. Okay, and you had to submit a lot of paperwork, and then did they interview you?
They did meet with us. Yes.
Okay, so they met with you. They interviewed you. Did they need to meet with your kids first?
No, they didn't meet with my kids.
Okay, so they interview the parents, and you fill out the application, and you tell what race they are, and you tell all this stuff, and then they got to make the choice of whether or not you got in.
100%. They got to make the choice.
They got to make the choice.
They acted like their own little magnet schools. picking who they
private
wanted.
school?
Yes.
Okay.
And they chose everyone who was looked like them, honestly. And so we entered this school system. That's one of the best school systems in the state.
Yes.
And it was for a lot of those kids. It was. My kids experienced racism in that school. My daughter experienced there was her second grade teacher who's still there, but because of it, there was a move. I mean, years after we left, a few other Indian American.
Tell us the truth. What happened?
Yeah, a few other Indian American parents came to us and said, "We heard that your daughter," because my daughter with the second grade teacher was screamed at. When my daughter started crying, she said, "Go outside and clean, and like compose yourself." She was harangued. My quiet, shy,
is a 7 or 8-year-old,
extremely shy second grader was screamed at by this teacher, and we're like, "God, what is this? Like, is it because of her race? Like, she does look different." And then a few other parents, Indian American parents, came to us and said, "She did this to our kids in the years following. She highlighted our kids, and she treated them. In one case, she screamed at them, berated them." And so we brought it to the school system, and nothing happened.
I was gonna say, what did that system do?
She got moved to being a kindergarten teacher. So now the kids have no way of speaking up. But anyway, the point is that amazing system wasn't right for my kids.
Right.
And so we took our kids out of that and we put them into another school. Like I've made choices, into into the Austin ISD system, which is the Austin ISD system is a whole other cognitive dissonance in how disparate some of those schools are. Because of the segregation in the city, how some of the ISD schools, elementary schools, are absolutely incredible.
Phenomenal. That's right.
And some are absolutely just really, really do not have the resources to succeed. And how hard it is potentially to transfer into one of those schools, and what roadblocks are created so that so that these little segregated fiefdoms within Austin ISD protect themselves.
That's right.
And we made the choice to transfer one of my kids into one of those little fiefdoms, which we succeeded in doing. And he was the only minority again in a school. And how is that possible in Austin ISD with so much diversity in some part that there isn't more transfers? What roadblocks have they created within their own system to prevent choice?
Right.
So I mean, it's this overall focus. It's not just about money. It's also about NIMBY. It's also about protection within the system of the rich and powerful.
That's right. I'm heartbroken, and there's a part of me that I'm grateful that you're talking about what happens, because this is a reality. And when we're far too many people are listening to the system, and if we just had more money, and if you just started listening to parents and letting them put their children, regardless of their race, income, the street they live on, or any other factor, in the best environment, and really ensuring that is an opportunity for every family, not just families who look a certain way or who have a certain amount of resources, right?
Right. And that's why we have
the
lotteries.
Interview process. And that is why charter schools are amazing.
Yes.
And why we have lotteries. I totally agree. It really is amazing to see. Again, I sing the praises of my daughter's school because it is incredibly diverse economically and racially. And it's just really refreshing to see all of these kids that are learning they're learning from a great curriculum. They've got incredible teachers, the administration, just top to bottom. It's a phenomenal school. And that's why I said, immediately we won the lottery.
Yeah, I'd love Eanes ISD to actually have a lottery.
Yeah.
I bet they would not do it.
I do not think they would, nor would a lot of these other ISDs that don't oftentimes. I mean, the sentiment is we don't want those kids, right? I mean, that's the sentiment.
Yes.
Insert whatever it is. Insert the poor kids. Insert, whatever it is. It's that narrative. And so oftentimes when we're fighting and arguing against the system, and they're saying, oh, you get to choose. One, charter schools do not get to choose, but two, it's you, the public school system, by virtue of the way it's set up, which is dictating to families where they must send their kid to get to school. That is what's going on, which is also why we hear so many great leaders say that it is truly empowering parents, and school choice is truly the civil rights issue of our time.
Yeah, because white or economically advantaged people could always opt out and send their kids to private school.
That's right.
That's always their option.
That's right.
And that is why you have all these like liberal white progressives, who are the other enemies of charters, anti-charter.
Yep.
Because they don't have to worry about their kids.
Right.
They don't have to worry about their choice. They have a choice. They have total freedom.
Yep.
And the cost to them is something they're willing to take on. But then they sit there after sending their kids to private school, and you always hear this come out all across the country about these issues.
Just
sending their kids to private school and then being anti-public school or anti-school choice.
Anti-open enrollment, anti-public charter schools, anti-school choice.
Because they could sit on their pedestal and be pro-teacher union.
That's right.
Because it doesn't matter for their kids.
That's right.
So, and then they talk about things like, well, we don't want to like brain drain these schools. We don't want to take kids away from these, like you're saying, oh, you want parents to be forced to send their kids to failing schools in order to make those schools better,
I hear this all the time. I actually have had several people within the school system and even teachers that send me, it's that same sentiment. I can vividly remember one sending me an email last year. She was on the parent empowerment list. She probably had come to an event. I hope she came and spoke to me, because there was tons of teachers and parents and just patriots, Texans, that would show up just to hear, what does this mean? What does this look like? And she sent an email saying, I can't support this because all the good parents will take all the good kids. And I thought, oh, and she said, I'm a teacher and blah, blah. And I thought, oh my goodness, what are you saying? First off, how dare you label kids, good versus not? That's just horrifying. But second off, when you break down the statement, what you're saying is just don't be poor.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally Gene Wu. He's another one I use. It happens all the time. All these, oftentimes Democrats, some Republicans that sent their kids to private schools. State Rep Travis Clardy sent his kids to a really fancy private school, and it's one of those things that you're just going, hold on a second. That dog does not hunt in my world. You have the choice, and you made a choice. And you're happy with that, but the whole sentiment behind it is, if you don't have the money, if you don't have the power, if you don't have the street address, then too bad for you. Just make more money. Just get more, resources. Just move to a different address. And it's just this real disconnect in those that support great charter schools, that support empowering parents with additional choices. It's just this narrative that if you don't have this, then, well, too bad for you. You just should have to be forced to go to that. And it really is broken down to freedom, and freedom that every American, every Texan, every parent deserves to be in control of their child's education.
Honestly, ultimately, it's about dollars.
Yep.
And it's not about parents, and it's not about kids.
Yep.
I think the best example of this was last session when a Pfluger ISD board member decided to kind of attack charter schools in her community and say that, that charter bills.
I recognize Ms. Meyer getting up there and
what she said. I mean, it's and Brad Buckley, the chairman of the Texas the Education Committee, really called her out in this great way. What she said is that, she looks down. I mean, and I think this is a common thing. They look down on their parents. They look down on their minority, like economically disadvantaged parents, and they feel like they could be tricked. They feel like they're not smart enough to make good decisions. And so she started bashing. She said, "Oh, these other schools, these charter schools have some advertising, and they're tricking these parents into applying
deceptive marketing."
And Brad Buckley said, and I forget the exact percentage, but he said, but only like 30% or whatever it was of Hispanic kids in your district are reading and doing math at grade level. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't that a choice that they're making? Like, what? And there's no way to respond.
Yep.
It's for them. It is not about because they don't believe these parents can make good choices.
That's right. Yeah, so we have that on our. We actually clipped that. I clipped several things that she said. She went at it with Representative Dutton as well about a similar thing, and it was literally the same sentiment, because they were talking also about allowing kids to come to schools. And I can't remember. She said, well, that's on the east side. On the west side, we can't do this. And it was just. It was this total disconnect. But she started off with saying, I'm from the East Coast. I mean, I'm a Texan. I don't care how you do it over there. We're going to do it our way, and we're going to do it better here. But she starts out with that. So I was immediately like, And then she said, we were in Austin ISD, and we were unhappy. So we just picked up and moved to Pflugerville. And I thought, lady, what is wrong with you? And again, it's that saying, just let them eat
Who
cake.
Who can do that?
Right. Oh, I mean,
some people can.
With resources.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing. And it was just this total disconnect and this absolute delusion that a lot of them operate under. So yes, you can go to txparentsmatters.com, txparentsmatters.com. All of these videos are there because it was insane. It was absolutely insane to sit there and listen to a trustee of an ISD just continue to make a fool of herself.
But it was great to me because it's what they talk about behind closed doors. It's their true sentiment.
That's it.
They really, it was a real great look into the mind of the anti-choice crowd.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't believe that these parents can make good choices for their kids.
Right.
And I think that at heart they probably feel that way. They've got to know. But at the end of the day, it's not about the parents. It's not about the kids. It's about the money.
It's about the money
for them.
It's about the system. That's exactly right. And that is why the parent empowerment movement has swept the nation, and it's sweeping Texas. And it's why parents have locked arms following our great governor and other leaders to say we're going to ensure that every parent is truly in charge of making choices, whether it's a charter school or a private school or a great public school or homeschool or whatever it is. Every parent should ultimately be in charge of making the decision regardless of their income or zip code or any other distinguishing factor. Ryan, I am so happy to have you here today. You have truly shone a light on a lot of the darkness that does occur, particularly in the political world. If you could tell parents of Texas, particularly those that are interested in charter schools or just interested in choice, if you could tell them one thing in that camera, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to stand up for choice, to take action, to contact your lawmakers during legislative session, to support public charter schools, to work to get to know the public charter schools in your community, and to fight for it, because it really is, having as every parent knows, having that the education of the kid of their children is one of the most important things that a parent can do, and having options is crucial. As I know as a parent, as you know as a parent, Mandy, as everyone knows, to being able to having your kids, be happy and thrive.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan, for being here. Thank you for advocating as a father. Thank you for all the hard work that you do leading the political side of things. We're all grateful. Thank you for joining us today. And now you have the power.